In today's video, I will be talking about Team Fortress 2 weapon reskins. Now you may ask, what the hell are weapon reskins? Well, to answer that question, weapon reskins are basically reskins of already existing weapons. Most of the weapon reskins are usually promotional items for different games or usually revolve around an update. So for this video, I want to talk about what if these weapon reskins were different to their counterparts in the game. For example, something like the Shooting Star, which is a primary sniper rifle reskin for the Machina, which is one of Sniper's primary weapons. So in today's video, I'm going to come up with weapon stats for most of the weapon reskins in the game and see what they would be if they were their own weapon in concept. The point is, what if the weapon reskins were different? Now, for context, I don't own most of these weapon reskins because they can be really expensive. Also, as a note, I worked on these from top down, so most of the stats revolve around the weapon's model or design, and I will, at the end of the video, be ranking them with my cousin to see if they have good synergy with other loadouts or if they could actually be viable in TF2. So, first, we will start with Germa 985 himself, the Scout. He only has 4 reskins in his loadout, and these are the Mutated Milk, which is a reskin of the Mad Milk, the Bat Saber, which is a reskin of the Stock Bat, and the Unarmed Combat, which is a reskin of the Holy Mackerel, and the 3 Ruin Blade, which is a reskin of the Boston Basher. So let's start with the Mutated Milk. For my idea, this weapon reskin is that it's like the Mad Milk, but with a little spin. Specifically, that it has a living, mutated bread monster in that jar. So my idea was to maybe, have it be like the Mad Milk, but a little bit different. So you can still throw it at enemies and give yourself healing plus your teammates healing, and it only has a 35% compared to a 60% of the normal Mad Milk. But I also added a 4-second bleed on direct hit because really, if you're throwing a jar of living creatures around, they're going to get hungry and they're going to want to eat someone. I also increased the charge by 5 seconds, so 25 seconds instead of the base 20. And then I reduced the effect duration to 4 seconds instead of the base 10 seconds. This will allow for more independent survivability when in sticky situations while being able to support your teammates if needed. The downside to this weapon is that if you have reduced healing from medics and pickups by 20%, so you have to think carefully and pick your fights, because if you overestimate yourself, you're going to end up face first on the floor. Now for the Bat Saber. I kind of went with this futuristic bat concept. It was the same idea that the other futuristic weapons had, so I went with a minus 20% damage towards buildings. But this weapon has an alt fire that allows you to charge a swing, kind of like an actual baseball bat. And when you let it go, it does a mini crit attack that knocks your enemies back. Something like the baseball swing taunt, but doesn't insta-kill. The downside to this weapon is it cannot crit and will only mini crit when it normally crits. This allows for some close range compatibility in case you end up in a corner that you can't get out of, allowing you to push them back and pull out your melee or secondary to finish them off, or knock them into a sentry nest for a quick getaway or something like that. And for Scout, it is the 3 Ruin Blade. I made this more of a half Satoichi for the Scout. So when equipped, any other Scout that also has the weapon equipped will instantly kill you. That's what the honor bound mechanism is. Also, for the honor bound system, if you put it away, you deal damage to yourself without getting a kill first. This weapon has an increased damage from the base 35 to 50, allowing for melee combat to be a little bit more better. And the downside is that this weapon deploys and holsters 50% slower, like the swords from demo, and the weapon swings 50% slower, like the swords. Next, for soldier, the rocket jumping American patriot, right? He unfortunately has one weapon reskin, and that is the original. This weapon is basically a weapon on its own because it's in the center of the screen compared to the left or right hand of the screen. Plus, the rockets are shot from the middle. But I came up with my own weapon idea just in case if it was like, oh, what if this actually could be different? Now, for the original, I thought this weapon being a powerhouse. For some of you, you may hate me for this, but what I came up with is that this weapon has the ability to blast you further while also increasing its base damage to 100 from the original base of 90. This seems a little powerful, I know, but stick with me here. For the downsides, this weapon fires absurdly slow with a 50% decrease in fire speed. With this, also the ammo reserve is reduced to 8 instead of the base 20. With this damage buff, you will also take 15% more blast jump damage, meaning that the gunboats will be probably needed for when you're air bombing and stuff like that, or just rocket jumping around. And I think this is fair, but I would like to see what you guys think of it in the comments down below. And that's it for Soldier. I hope that he has more in the future for reskins, right? Now, for the Pyro, some interesting reskins in this section. I will only be covering the Nostromo Palmer and the Pulsar Plumber, and at the end I will explain why I left some reskins out. First, we'll start with the Nostromo Napalmer. This weapon is based off the flamethrower from the movie Alien, which is a very good sci-fi movie. You guys should watch it. My concept for this weapon is that it's napalm focus, so I removed air blast, but also added an alt-fire flammable AoE gas that's similar to the gas passer. Now you might think, why the hell would we give Pyro another gas passer? It's already bad. But hear me out, right? Instead of it just being able to set people on fire with any source of damage, it can only be set on fire with flame particles. So this means only pyros can set you on fire. The point of this ability is to be more area denial, right? So it's going to linger for a while, right? And it's good for traps, right? For setting up like a trap or something like that. This will also allow people to be like, oh, I need to pay attention to what's going on instead of just rushing to the point or the cart, right? The downside is this alt fire consumes 50% more ammo than your primary fire, and the flame damage is decreased by half. So enemies set on fire with this alt ability will have damage done in mini crits to make up for the pitiful primary fire damage. Second, we were talking about the Pulsar Plumber. This weapon is literally a mailbox. Like, he literally just pulled it off the ground from some dude's house, right? This is a weapon reskin of the Extinguisher. My idea for this weapon is that it's the Market Gardener for Pyro, right? So the weapon has an alt fire that knocks back enemies on hit, and a successful kill will give you a temporary speed boost. Also, while airborne, this alt fire will always crit, kind of like the Market Gardener. The downsides are that this weapon has a 30% slower firing speed, no random crits, and when the alt fire is activated, there's a 1.6 second cooldown to both primary and secondary melee swings before use. That's it for Pyro. I did not touch the Pyroland weapons in the mall because the Pyroland weapons, they would be basically busted because only Pyroland users can see them. So it'd be pointless. And the mall is literally just a hammer. So it's better just to be a reskin of the Home Wrecker. Next up is the drunk, one-eyed, explosive handler, the Demo Man. I'm only covering 3 different reskins: the Bootlegger, the Scottish Handshake, and the Nestle's 9-Iron. We'll start with the Bootlegger. This weapon is a reskin of the Alibaba's Wee Booties, which is it mainly used for demo nights. Now, my idea for this weapon is that it's more targeted towards sticky demos, with the weapon having a decrease in blast jump damage by 60%, but with the downside of decreasing secondary weapon damage by 25%, making it viable for sticky demos while also making it more fun to play against them. Imagine this like the gunboats for the demo, but you also do less damage. So it doesn't make them absolutely busted. Next, we have the good old Scottish Handshake. This weapon is a reskin of the stock bottle, so nothing special. But my idea for this weapon is to make it a healing item as well, the ability to damage. So this weapon can heal you if you perform the stock bottle taunt, healing you for 50 HP with a 15-second cooldown, so it can't be abused. The caveat to this is that the bottle is if the bottle is broken, you cannot heal at all and becomes a normal weapon. So the weapon fires 15% slower and decreased healing from medics and pickups by 30%. This allows for more independent play and not relying on a medic up your ass 24/7. For the Nessie's 9 iron, which has always been a mystery to me. It's like, why is a golf club chopping people's heads off? So I made it to where instead of being a reskin of the Islander, I made it more golf focused, I guess. So this weapon, when charging with a shield, causes melee attacks to increase knockback on hit. Also with this weapon, you can deflect round projectiles. So something like the Demo Man's pipes or the Scout's Sandman ball or the Rap Assassin ball, making it so you can still die to soldiers because you can't reflect the rockets, right? I also kept the 20% slower swing speed and the increased melee range from the Eyelander, so it's still at least viable in other combat situations with other weapons. That's it for demo. I did not touch the HHH head taker because it's basically just the same as the Eyelander, but it's a Halloween version, so it makes more sense just it being a reskin. For the heavy, he does have a good amount of reskins, um, but I only touched on a few of them because some of them are just better as reskins, right? So I'll only be going over the Apoco Fists and the Bread Bite. And we'll start with the Apoco Fists. The Apoco Fists are a reskin of the stock fists with a funny kill effect of explosion on crit kill. That's pretty funny now, isn't it? So I took the idea and turned it into a mechanic. The Apoco Fists on crit kill now explode similar to the Caber, and it'll be doing around 25 to 50 damage. With this also having a 20% explosive resistance, so you can be a little bit more resistant against those pesky explosive classes, right? Now, the downsides are this weapon has a 10% movement speed while equipped and a minus 10% swing speed, making it more of a utility like the Fists of Steel. For the Bread Bite, which is a reskin of the Gloves of Running Urgently, GRU for abbreviation, I turned it into a weapon that acts as like you're using a living creature as hands. So the weapon has 5 seconds of bleed on hit, but if you miss, you inflict bleed onto yourself. This also will give you 25 HP on kill, but decreases your base health by 50, making it seem like you're literally using living creatures on your hands, making it a last resort in dire situations. Uh, and that'll be it for heavy. There wasn't really much. I didn't want to go over the lunchbox items because they just made sense staying themselves. So we'll move on to the engineer. The engineer, like soldier, only has one weapon reskin, and it is the Geiger counter, which is a weapon reskin for the Wrangler. And this weapon I almost completely changed with a new interesting concept. So, for this weapon, when this weapon is active, Enemies are marked by the sentry when firing with primary fire. This, in turn, marks enemies, and the sentry gun will continuously track the marked user until the marked user is dead or unmarked. For for this, when sentry guns are tracking marked enemies, the incoming damage is reduced by 50% and repairs are reduced by 80%. This weapon also has kept the 3-second downtime disability, but only after the sentry is unmarked, meaning it can be vulnerable if not watched. Oh, and this weapon also shows enemy health. For the medic, there's not really much of the medic, honestly. I'm hoping that there's more in the future, maybe like a syringe reskin or something like that, but nothing for medic so far. Sniper. Now, this one's a long one, so hold on to your hats. It's gonna be a doozy. The sniper has a lot of weapon reskins for his primary weapon, and I'll be going over all of them, including the only secondary reskin. So let's start with the upper hand. Right, this weapon is a stock reskin of the stock rifle, inspired by the Valve game Counter-Strike. I made this weapon more faithful to Counter-Strike. So I have added a second scope feature, which scopes 50% more than base scope. I also increased the damage by 50%. That means all body shots instantly kill light classes and medics. Now I know this seems absolutely broken, but hear me out. This weapon now has a magazine with 5 bullets and reserve ammo is decreased to 10. So now in between shots you have to reload on top of pulling the bolt back. I also increased the charge time and made it to where moving while scoping blurs your screen and decreases accuracy by 60% base zoom and 100% secondary zoom. I think this is fair enough to make it not overpowered and forcing sniper players to take a more thoughtful way of playing. So making sure you're not, constantly being shot at or something like that. Especially this is good for long range situations against other snipers where you'll be pressing A and D and trying to move around, try to dodge them, right? So it's a trade-off. The next up is the Shooting Star, which is a reskin of the Machina, like I said earlier in the video. We all know the Machina is the most unfun weapon to play with when you have Sniper. And because of the damage buff on it. So I wanted to make it different from the gun, but I also wanted to stay kind of truthful to the model. So I made it to where it's like a futuristic rifle. So I kept the cannot fire while scoped, but I added a M1 charge, kind of like the Huntsman, which does increase damage the longer you hold the charge. But I also added an overheating mechanism to where if you hold the max charge for too long, you will inflict a burn on yourself and letting go will make it unusable for a period of time. So holding your charge for as long as you can isn't the best thing, so it makes you make quick decisions, right? Um, I also made it have full visibility when scoped instead of the small focus like on most sniper rifles. I This is a very unique thing. I do like this personally. Pats on the shoulder, on the back, or whatever for this one. I really do like this one. I think this is a very interesting type of rifle that mixes kind of some other stuff. Um, But now let's shine the light on the fortified compound. This weapon is a reskin of the Huntsman, and this weapon will be a lot similar, but a little bit tweaked. So what, excuse me. So what I did was I had it do base sniper rifle damage, and headshot arrows can penetrate and hit other players. The downside is the charge time is increased by 2 seconds, and the aim fatigue is decreased by 3 seconds. So holding down your fire will have aim fatigue a lot faster. Also, the arrows cannot be lit on fire. So if you're playing like medieval mode, this is not the weapon. Um, I thought of this idea because it is based off a weapon from another game, because this is a promotional item, but also because it's based off a compound bow, so which are used for hunting. So I kind of had something like that. And last for sniper, we have the self-aware beauty mark. This weapon is a reskin of the Jarate. I had the same idea I had with the mutated milk for this. So it's kind of you're throwing a bread monster at someone, right? So this weapon on direct hit inflicts bleed damage for 5 seconds while also making coded enemies have 15% damage vulnerability. The downside is that the charge time is increased and you can no longer extinguish yourself, but you can still extinguish teammates. This encourages more team play and helping with tough fights, but also making it a more aggressive weapon. And last but not least, the French backstabber, the spy. I did ideas for most weapons. I did not touch the invis watches because it's just an invisible watch, so there's really no point to it, in my opinion, at least. But we'll start off with the only primary reskin, which is the Big Kill. This weapon is a reskin of the stock revolver. The idea is meant for those big plays, so I increased the base damage to 50 while also halving the base reserve ammo by 50%. I also made it to where cloaking, the damage resistance and status effect resistance is 50% less effective. So that means cloaking, while, in a combat situation, probably isn't the best thing, right? Also means like status effects will last longer, so like Jarate and Bleed, right? The only other downside is that it has a minus 20% firing speed and a new-ish mechanic to where it only mini crits when normally crits, but random crits are also mini crits. So mini crits all around. Next, we have a stair-stabbing spy's dream, the Sharp Dresser. This is a weapon promo for the Assassin's Creed games, and is a reskin of the stock butterfly knife. I made it more faithful to the games, so I made it to where this weapon cannot backstab, but only crits while airborne. So I made it a spy market garner, basically. I also increased the base damage to 65 and gave it a 20% more cloak drain on wear. So it increases more trick stabbing, I guess. So you get your epic stair stabs or, something like that, or like your surf stabs or whatever. And then for the other reskin for the knife, the Wanga prick, it is a reskin of the Your Eternal Reward. This I made it, and thanks to Great Blue for this idea. This weapon can only backstab, but a backstab kill will mark every nearby enemy, including yourself, with the marked for death status effect. For this, the weapon deploys 50% faster. Now, the Zappers are an interesting set of reskins. One of them is a reskin promo for Portal 2. And I'll start with the AppZap, which is the Portal 2 promo reskin. For this weapon, I went with a more of a hacking type weapon. So this weapon can be placed on teleporters, and what happens is that the teleporter entrance will break if a enemy uses the enemy teleporter. This only lasts 5 seconds when placed. Um, if it's placed on a dispenser, it removes reserved ammo from enemies, and this zapper only lasts 8 seconds. If placed on a sentry, targets enemy engineers, and this only lasts 2 seconds. I know this seems kind of unfair, but let me tell you, this weapon has a 20-second cooldown per use, and buildings are kept at their current level. Dispensers double output for enemies, so it drains ammo faster and decreases engineer metal gain. The sap sentry only targets the engineer, and the cooldown only activates when the sapper self-destructs, or it is removed. It's an interesting concept that I would like to hear feedback from, so let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And last is the snack attack. This is a reskin of the sapper that has a living bread monster on it, literally. So I made it to where this can only be placed on medics. So when placed on medics, it will drain Uber for 3 seconds, maybe like 3 seconds of like losing 5% Uber or something like that. If it is placed while a medic is under Uber charge, it will stun the medic for 2 seconds. This seems kind of bust, but if you work with your team, you can still use that Uber charge, right? The caveat to this is that this weapon has a 50% damage vulnerability while equipped, but also having a 20% movement speed while activated on a medic, and a 10% health given while activated on a medic. This weapon also does have a 10-second cooldown, so be careful and use it wisely. I did not cover any of the melee or any of the multi-class melees and secondaries because they would be better just as reskins. Also, that's going to take a lot more time than I have. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope this video inspires you to think about stuff like this. And I would like to thank Great Blue, Fish Stick on a Stick, and my cousin for some of these ideas. I hope you all enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.